that worked quite smoothly this time. Every Sunday at 5:55 here in the UK, Harry has a programme that he beams out live on various different platforms. We follow the Autistic Radio.com Facebook page that he curates, and we take posts from that and we speak about it. I'm just checking in a few different places a bit of technical, so if people could just hold line for a second. Yep, we seem to be going out everywhere. If you want to join the show, there's a special link. You need to come over to a StreamYard link and join us here in the multi-user studio. But if you're happy just listening, that's perfectly fine. I can see that there are a number of different people in different places. Welcome to Autistic Radio, guys. The first post that Harry has up for us is one that was recently put there, and I'm going to go straight into it. It's from Trauma Geek, Trauma and Neurodiversity Education. Long post, so I won't read the whole thing. I'll ask people to go to Facebook autisticradio.com to see all of the post. Neurotypical is a tiny box that only a small percentage of people fit into. There are actually more neurodivergent people in the world, globally, than neurotypical people. Okay. The normative standard for neurology was determined by wealthy men in Western culture. Autistic social theorists have called that normative standard neurotypical. The majority of people who exist outside of Western culture would be considered neurodivergent because their neurology doesn't match that of the men who decided what was and what wasn't normal. Okay, I see where we're going here now. We're extending out the idea of neurodivergence into everybody that doesn't fit a very narrow standard, and I think I can get along with that idea on the basis that the neurotypical way is a Western cultural norm, isn't it? And it's a capitalist norm. So neurotypical is often about our culture as much as our neurology.
Yeah, there's something to that. I read this post a while back and felt okay about it. Yeah, very positive. I like the way they write. I look forward to their posts. And I can see the alignment that they're drawn. But I temper it a bit now, because generalism is really tempting.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Making a point in a general way to make a point, and then you have to swing the pendulum back away from that point. I do think it is a good idea to get people who are supposedly the normal to consider to themselves how restricted that version of normal is worldwide. But if I look at this in a scientific sense, I do believe that there are functional structural differences between neurodivergent brains and another group of people that is a larger majority. So my experience of travelling around the world is I have met plenty of neurodivergent people in different cultures, and they have to me a sense of oneness or belonging or community with me that transcends their locality. It transcends their tradition or their culture to some degree, and I feel as though there's more similarity between myself and an African tribesman who is neurodivergent and autistic than there is with my neighbour who is here white and in Scotland with a similar experience of our culture.
Did you feel that you were out with the machine of capitalism? And then did you notice that the machine is even creeping into their culture and way of life? Although their way of lives are so strong, perhaps, and longer, that they could possibly survive that influence.
No. My experience of travelling the world is that people are entirely dependent on the capitalist system, and any notion of the romantic savage or the indigenous people that are living a wonderful coexistence with nature is blown away by your actual experience of what these countries are like when you visit them. If you go to India and you're in Delhi, you could be in London at various times. If you go anywhere outside the small area in the centre of Delhi, you are in a world that looks like it was built in the next century, not this century. You travel into Indonesia, and capitalism is there like you saw in Hong Kong previously. It everywhere I have been around, however off the beaten track I get, there are signs that everybody needs to deal with the capitalist system, and they are the victims of it.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep more than one window open here. So, as it says, an imaginary cultural standard that is enforced on people. So, what are we saying then? What do we agree with here? That there is something in other cultures which resists this imaginary cultural standard which is being defined as, say, Western.
It's making me think, I don't know how to answer what you said, but it is making me think about there are definitely some parts of autism, like to different degrees and different people that aren't just like social, like capitalism disabling people. Um, perhaps there's like we can't speak for then all autistic people at all, but there are challenges that go beyond like social structure, like the capitalism, to like to be a support needs that um a society based on whatever value, whether it's like some capitalist stuff will be set up to support. And I don't think that any of our needs aren't needs that everybody has, but it's like we, to varying degrees, we are needing support from others to meet them, or maybe it's challenging for us to meet certain needs that are relational because the relational world is so hard, uh, or can be so hard. So I just don't want to be too like sweeping and just be like, oh, everybody's neurodivergent. It's just like there's only a tiny amount of people who succeed at capitalism, because it feels like that might be missing out a lot of nuance.
So, Jules, do you agree with what I just put in the text there? Because you brought it up earlier, this turning of things around.
Right, what you've put in the text there is it's a secondary primary thing again, that neuronormativity is the exception. I'm happier to work with the idea of neurodivergence and neuronormativity within a context of structures within brains. I'm happier to work within that, but I can take what the person is saying here in the text is that they're saying effectively normal is a rare thing because it's decided by a small group of people, the winners of capitalism, and that everybody else within that, within the capitalist system, then they're not the winners and they're not making up the rules that fit them to what is and isn't neuronormative. So normal behaviours and normal structures in our society do appear to be very much, they've moved away from what the church was and they've moved towards what, not a shady cabal of individuals, but a generalised sense of what capitalism has created has as a structure now. So I do accept what they're saying is that society itself fits the smallest number of people. The way that we are trying to make us all conform to things fits a very small population of the world and a small group of people. I can take it as a metaphor, but I think we're also using it as a way of confusing ourselves if we do that.
It could be a way of unifying people that, you know, in a sense, it's a paradox that we are normal.
Yeah, lassoing more people into feeling that they are individual and their individual comes from their different neurology or how they're built rather than how they themselves are behaving within a society, is a good way of bringing people together and including people. Yeah, I can get that. I don't think it's something that's going to go very far outside this Facebook page, though. I'm going to read a bit more about this post. Neurotypical is the dominant or normative stereotype, or normative neurotype. Not because of numbers, but because of who has the power in our society. To codify various mental conditions as disorders, professionals sat around tables and voted on traits, classifying things as normal or abnormal. Not by any actual scientific evidence, but based on whether or not they personally possess those traits. Neurodivergent and neurotypical are not medical or biological terms, they are social justice terms. The purpose of these terms, according to the people who coined them, is to be able to discuss systematic power dynamics. These words are partly about how our brains work, but even more than that, they are about how the world treats us for the way that our brain works. Neuronormativity is not the most common neurology. It's an imaginary cultural standard that's enforced upon people. When we challenge neuronormative expectations, it helps everyone, not just those of us who are already divergent. So they're explaining it better, aren't they? They're saying, okay, so they mixed it up together at the beginning, possibly to call people to action, but they refine it at the end and they say, yes, actually there are versions of neuronormativity and neuroatypical people, neurodivergence from a norm. Those people are already know that they're divergent, and you need to bring along, as you said, lasso in the rest of society to realise that they don't fit the standards that are put out either, and they are actually part of the revolution.
Yeah, she used the word everyone, I think, and then in the paragraph before what you read, they used the word most. I think I'll read it. Acquired neurodivergence from cumulative stress, trauma, injury, and aging happens all the time, and in modern life, it happens to most people.
Yeah, we have to steer away from even suggesting that autism can be acquired, though. So we have to be absolutely clear that what we're saying is the broader sense of neurodivergence can be acquired.
I spotted that, but I read it because it said neurodivergence, which is a more general term than autism, and explained it as stress, trauma, injury, and aging. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. My neighbour here, young man I knew before the accident, and he acquired a brain injury when he was out on his racing cycle. He was a keen club cyclist, and he was in an accident with a motor vehicle, and he has now acquired a brain injury, and he has a neurodivergence. He has all kinds of things that remind me of autism, as he is at the moment, but it's a neurodivergent brain from an acquired injury. Whether or not I thought he may have been slightly neurodivergent before or not is a personal thing.
Yeah, I don't think they were saying that these people are, I'm losing it now, autistic or neurodivergent. It was the opposite. It was that they are not neurotypical.
Yeah, good point made. Yeah. Let's move on to the next post. It's from Embrace Autism. We've generally been very happy with what we've seen put out by Embrace Autism, and it is in cooperation with one of the big charities here in Scotland. So that's nice. It's nice to see that something that we endorse being part of the mainstream as well. Understanding Autism, a journey to self-acceptance. Did you know that getting diagnosed with autism can transform lives, especially for adults? Research shows that an autism diagnosis not only provides clarity and identity, but also helps individuals understand their unique traits as part of a broader, multidimensional spectrum, rather than as personal failings. At Embrace Autism, we offer Autism AUDHD assessments for adults 18+. Our mission is to empower you with the understanding and resources you need to thrive, whether through an assessment or by reading our science and experience-based articles. Ready to embrace your true self? Visit our website at embraceautism.com. That's always a trouble, isn't it? Because it's selling a service. I seem to remember it's not the most expensive way around it, though, and I feel that there's certainly a value in making sure a service that is as far as we know, informed by Dr. Natalie Engelbrecht and Eva Silvertant, the people who are out there and have been out there for a long time looking at things from a neurodivergent point of view. And their website also gives you the access to the online tests, the AQ and the RADS that people are looking for, as well as the ASRS 5, a simple 6-question. So even if you go to their site just to look through the various free parts that they're offering you, and you end up somebody who supports the work that they do in other ways, I think it's good that we share this. Is everybody else with me on that?
Yeah, like I was just thinking there that I was quite grateful that there was tools like that available, like online. And I'm remembering when my friend suggested that I do the AQ10, and it felt almost like a bell rang throughout my entire life. And it was like such an instant shift. It made so much sense of a really confusing experience up to that point, and put it into a context. But it was a real it was a real kind of like shock for the brain to sort of have to reorganize like that. Um, yeah, and it really what has been transformational. It's felt like it's it's given me a way of understanding myself um that isn't harmful. Like I had quite a harmful view of myself, quite a stigmatized view of myself before.
I'm leaving lots of gaps so people can speak if they want to, or put things in the text. We're back with the autistic teacher, always popular here on the page. Why the why is important. For autistic individuals, knowing why something is happening goes beyond mere curiosity. It's a way to reduce anxiety, process information at a deeper level, and create a sense of predictability and control in an otherwise chaotic world. I'm happy about all the sentiments behind that. I just find it a little bit unhelpful to have things in quite such dramatic terms. But then that might just be the mood I'm in. I like to know the why, and as a child, wanting to understand the complete process, and have the questions answered that came from the answers to the previous questions was an absolute thing. It was the child that always asked why. That was me. It was the child that always looked for extra ways of finding out the answers to the questions that my parents couldn't answer. Finding books, finding any way out, looking at television programs that were way beyond me to try and understand the whys of everything. And I I think there is a difference between autistic people and non-autistic people that I've observed. Benefit greatly when we're learning something if we have a complete understanding of it rather than being able to just put facts away. And I know that that works against some of the autistic people out there who are able to squirrel away enormous amounts of facts. So always there's a caveat in everything that we say. But I do feel that there's something in the autistic sensibility that means our lives are easier if we can be explained the whole process rather than just little bits of it, please. And if you can give us all the information behind what you're doing, we will be much more compliant to follow your instructions. And in our lives as autistic people, we find our questioning and asking why appears to be a difficulty. It's received negatively. It's received as undermining the hierarchy or getting in the way of the process. Do other people have similar experiences around this?
A piece of information that is useful today might not be useful tomorrow. So I kind of look at adaptability with regards to giving order to chaos. Because asking why is often in itself an insecurity. You know, I need to know in order to have some kind of security, some meaning. But as I said at the beginning, something you learnt today that helped you give order to things might not work later. So maybe then you suggest you find another piece of information, but maybe you just need to let go of information sometimes. And it kind of made me smirk seeing that. Smirk is a terrible word, but I chuckled a little bit reading that first page. A sense of predictability and control in an otherwise chaotic world. Well, is the world chaotic? It seems very ordered to me. You know, chaos is quite rare. So, yeah, why and asking, you know, we do that, yeah, but we have to ask ourselves why we're asking why.
I heard that apparently autistic brains like take in a lot more information at rest. And I wonder if some of the why is a little bit to know what to pay attention to. I'm going into this, you're leading me through this experience, and I'm going to take in all of the information and not know which bits are relevant here. This is like a lot. If you give me a bit of a gist, then I'll know what to look for. I remember at school really finding it difficult if I was led through, say, an art project without an idea of what we were going to do at the end. I used to find a lot of it gave me a really uncomfortable feeling. I would get quite stuck because I knew that this was going to be part of something bigger, and I was held back from knowing. Yeah.
I think it's often I think it's a failure for us to accept hierarchy often. if somebody tells me why we're doing something, they don't accept it as, well, I might be able to improve upon it. They don't accept it as a reasonable expectation that people should understand why they're doing things rather than just do them. It does seem that we are constantly being trained as a society to follow instruction without understanding. And I find that a dangerous state to be in. I find if I am just doing something without understanding the why, then that's when I get hurt or damaged or conned, or I need to look beyond what other people are telling me. I need to see the hidden agenda. And I do think that is part of the autistic sensibility.
Has seeing the hidden agenda helped at all?
Yes, yes, it has. I feel as though we're all doing that, and when we discuss things, that's what you're pointing out a lot of the time. You're pointing out the hidden agenda in certain systems. It's something you're doing all the time, Raymond, in macro and micro scales. We are looking at life in a reasoned way that maybe puts stress on us because we have to think an awful lot about it, but it also means a lot of the time we're unwilling to go blindly into things that I do believe people who are not autistic do more often. I believe that they are carried along by group sentiment and empathy with the group, whereas autistic people are not so much. I want to check with you, Nicola, if I've sort of spoken in a too strong a way there. What do you think about that?
Sorry, how would you, which, I didn't think you spoke so strongly. I didn't, I was thinking, I think it is, it's making me think a lot about the reasons that the autistic experience has been is has been so marginalised when given what we were talking about with the witch wound, and like neurodivergence is perhaps like, I think there's quite a strong argument that it was disabled people, neurodivergent people, that were accused of witchcraft. And I think that if you've got people who seem really resistant to programming, who question authority, who question procedure, as opposed to do what was done like to me, which was to suggest that I was insane, or in other ways to suggest that somebody is a practicing witch, or any sort of stigmatizing, invalidating label, then you've just neutralized your threat. You're making that solitary minded nature, that independence, that you're pathologizing something that's really quite powerful, or potentially powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Um, there's something that doesn't sit comfortably about this, the way it's described, because it's written in a way of we're the problem. You know, it's written our excuse for wanting to know what's going on is because we're anxious or because we need that old trope of predictability, and we need control because we see the world as chaotic. Raymond has just said there's not enough chaos in the world, actually, that we live in very regimental ways because of society. And I get what he's saying there. It's written from a point of we have a problem and please excuse us for wanting to know why something is happening. And because it's not mere curiosity, it's a way to reduce anxiety. And please allow us to process our information at a deeper level. And we need a sense of predictability. That's one of our failings, so please allow it to us. Do you see where that sticks in the craw to me? Because it actually says that we are failing when what we should be doing is celebrating. And I think you've just said something about it being celebrated.
It is a bit tricky because I think it is. It's like if you occupy the sick role, because we know what you are in the sick role. If you stay in your sick role, we can handle your needs. If you step outside the sick role, what happens then? You know, how are your traits received when they're not so contained, managed? I'm kind of referring to this idea that that there's like different valid roles in society, and the sick role is our socially is a socially sanctioned way to exist if you're not easily assimilated in as a worker. Um, but that really, like, if you were to look at that role, it erases so much. There's a lot of value and a lot of impact that can come from like a few hours work that somebody does, a few hours of like connecting over a, a community project that can be really valuable, but the sick role kind of erases that.
Can you remind me what the sick rule is?
The sick role. So it's an idea in sociology, um, that by lumping that would say that kind of like what we're talking about with autism and the strengths of autism, rather than looking at it from like the deficits model. The post that we're looking at, it seems to be say it has that tone that the tone that you described, that made you feel uneasy, and I think it's to do with like it's that placing of autism within the sick role in sick role in society, when you could quite easily see some of the traits that we're talking about you know, not being willing just to kind of go with the crowd and these sorts of things. You could see them as like radicals or like reactionaries, intellectuals, or many different roles.
Okay. So,
Almost like you, or as calibrators of society.
so the sick role can be mad, or the sick role can be too disabled to be useful, or the sick role can be bad and need to be imprisoned.
Yeah, I think so. I think all of those, and it's almost like a submission to a role where you're kind of a problem that society has to tend to and fix in the sick role.
Yeah, I completely get what you're saying now. I think you want to check your microphone there, Ray, and see if it's managed to come through, yeah? I'm going to look at the next page of this post because we got quite into that one. The details. Autistic people often need more information because we see the details first. We think about the most intricate and detailed information before we can before we can understand the bigger picture. I'm uncomfortable with this one. I'm not uncomfortable with making people think about it. I'm uncomfortable with the tone. I need information to build the bigger picture out of the details. And that is a positive for me. But as soon as you say we see details first, it makes us look inadequate and unfocused on larger ideas. It makes us look as though we're nitpicking. And my experience is that autistic people always seem to approach things in a much more holistic way, because as soon as you say one concept, their brain brings up so many different connections and ideas that they're fighting to get through. And I don't think we do what is a slur on us, which is concentrate only on the details. I think we are careful enough to often use the details as a way into something, but we are very big picture, holistic people often. So it's all the right information, but it still gives me a sense that they're working from what you've just described as a sick model. Before we can understand the bigger picture, we have to have this. Leave us time to get all the details in. No, I don't think autistic brains are doing that. I think autistic brains often jump to the holistic big picture, and we're ahead of the game, and then we're using all the details to flesh out and sort it. It just seems as though we're going from the sick end.
Yeah, it does seem a bit strange to pathologise looking at the details. Don't look too closely. Stop it.
the next page on this post has the word anxiety in again. And I do feel anxious sometimes. I feel anxiety about all kinds of social situations and such like, but I don't live in a constant state of anxiety. And I don't find I don't find it helpful to give the impression that we do live in a constant state of anxiety. We are often encountered in a state of anxiety because the situation we're in makes us anxious. If you are a psychiatrist working with autistic people, you are almost exclusively going to see anxious autistic people. If you are any kind of worker, support worker with autistic people, don't kid yourself that those people around you are entirely unmasked, except on very exclusive and unusual situations. Those people are anxious around you in the main until you create a real empathy and rapport with them. But you can fool yourself into feeling that they're not anxious and they're not. It's a situation of being outside what's comfortable. And if you're constantly meeting us where we are at our least comfortable, then calling us in a constant state of anxiety makes sense to you. But it's not helpful for our self-esteem to look on everything as a need to alleviate our general anxiety. Am I anywhere near the mark for other people here?
I do think that I think it could be really easy to neglect our mental health. Sorry, somebody's just knocked at my door. 2 seconds, I'll have to go.
Did you see what we were talking about, Ray? We've gone on a couple of pages on the Facebook page, and I'm on the bit where it says about reducing anxiety, and I was putting forward the proposition that we might give the impression that we live in a constant state of anxiety, but we don't.
I would agree with that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, all good, mate.
Yeah, it's just when I was out walking the dog, I decided to go on what I call walking the talk, which is like trying to pick up the link outside. Because I've seen that some people, when they communicate in these forums outside whilst they're mobile, gives it a different energy. But the traffic was too loud for me to even hear what you were saying. But anyway, in the context of what you just asked, I don't think we're anxious all the time. There's moments when we encounter anxiety because of the challenge of connecting and communicating with our experience. You know, social stuff and commitments and challenges and conditioned responses to long-term chronic things. But generally speaking, I think we're at some kind of rest, hopefully. Although my mother had a thing called GAD, which I think is called Generalised Anxiety Disorder. I think my brother had it too. And that seemed to be a fairly constant thing, or so it was diagnosed, and so it was medicated. So who knows? My experience of my mother and my brother was that maybe that was an undercurrent, but it wasn't evident all the time. We can all display or express different feelings. It's very fluid, I feel.
Yeah, think that it's important that we address our mental health. It's like to be autistic doesn't mean you need to be depressed all the time, and like anxiety and generalized anxiety disorder, like they're I think it's so important that we're able to get resources so that we can distinguish between, what is really anxiety, what's what's a sensory need, and how are the sensory needs affecting anxiety and things like that too, because there's a difference between being in a distressing environment and being anxious. Like anxiety is less about the present and more about like the fear of the future. um and before diagnosis, and I've heard this from other women before, I'm not sure how it is for men, but like what I've seen in others and experienced myself is like a life of kind of just being kind of labeled a bit mentally ill, put on antidepressants for crazy, like huge big long periods of time, and just being quite not well. That's not effect. There wasn't. I didn't need. It's a not effective treatment where there are good tools to deal with trauma and anxiety, but I think we've touched on this at the very start of the show. But it's people are so used to seeing traumatized autistic people that there's a lot of people with like untreated and diagnosed complex PTSD, that does need a different does need specific care and can improve.
Yeah, like management, and of course PTSD I see as a consequence of the trauma of perhaps being autistic. Anyway, over to you, Jules.
No, I think I was going to say something very similar, Ray. I think um, I always want to differentiate between people's experience of, let's call it mental illness. Let's just use that old term. Um, I would say mental distress. Let's say mental distress because I actually don't like using the word mental illness. I just can't use it. Let's say mental distress. And that mental distress can be labelled in different ways, but it's not necessarily the autism. Your autism may have put you into a situation where you accumulated mental distress, like PTSD that you said, because you were in a bad situation, an abusive situation, or a traumatic situation of real trauma, you know. But I always want us to try and differentiate between autism and other experiences of people's mental health, because I do believe that there's a large group of autistic people out there that are in good enough environments for themselves, and environments that they have the ability to adapt to, whether that be somebody who is living in a tribe somewhere in an idyllic place, or whether it be a rich guy who's managed to create his own world. And just being autistic does not mean you have a crap experience of life. It's, as you said, Raymond, the bits that come with it from society on top. Because you're autistic, you get treated badly, etc. There's just 5 minutes of Harry's show left, so I'm going to just bring in the last piece. Communication styles. Due to differences in communication styles, a neurodivergent person may ask more questions to clarify exactly what is meant or what is happening. We aren't being rude. We just want to make sure we understand and get it right. So again, it's in a slightly fawning way that it's described, but it's much clearer here, and it's less objectionable to me, and definitely true. We have a difference in communication. Let's call it a difference in style, and let's say it's perfectly okay to ask more questions. It's perfectly reasonable to clarify. If your social system, whether it be a workplace or a school, does not allow people to clarify whether they understood something when you're passing on for information, and you call it rude, you're to blame, not the people.
Communication is kind of my favourite subject, but you know, I'm toiling to communicate it.
Oh, the irony. Ray, you're writing comedy material all the time here, aren't you?
No, it's no joke. The mind can work faster than whatever it is, the mouth, you know, the mode of expression. Even engaging in these conversations and discussions, sometimes I'll just lose my thought because someone is, you know, expanding upon a subject and what they mean. And I'm listening to that and absorbing that, but I'm also responding in my head and noting it and going, mention that, expand a bit on that. And then when it comes to it, I've lost it. So that kind of connection and communication makes me think that there are other ways to experience that connection and communication and understanding. And it may just be in where you're left with that, which is like no communication, just listening, just letting it go and letting it come round again, or maybe not insisting so much on the fact that conversation and discussion with other people is your mode of communication even.
Yeah, thanks for changing what I said there. That's really helpful. This losing your thread, something that, as you know, constantly happens to me, and then just picking another thread that has been there as well. I also feel that there's no way we could pick up on all the threads that come to us. There's just no way. Every time somebody says something, we get so many different directions to go in. We can't follow all those filaments. It's a choice that we're making constantly, and then because we're making a choice from so many different directions, that kind of stilts us. That's how it feels to me a lot of the time. And then putting this to the post, that's why we need to clarify. That's why we need to have questions, because our brain has gone somewhere else that may actually turn out to be quite relevant, but we may have lost immediately the grasp of what was being said. So I think we need to just, as a society, be much more tolerant to people communicating and asking, and they're giving you the help, they're telling the help they need. They're saying, can you say that again? Can you repeat it? Can you give it to me again? That's the help I need. Just give it to them. You know, just help them.
Or maybe the fact you didn't understand is exactly what was being communicated.
I feel like from the whole chat, it feels a bit like there's been a lot of non-duality and quite a lot of collapsing binaries in this conversation. And yeah, I could also relate to losing the thread because there's a lot of it feels like it's different tangents and having to choose which one you're going to pick up. It's quite fun.
Okay, well, the squeaky toy tells us that our hour is up. We've reached 6:55. So,
Well
thank
done.
you. On radio days, yes. Thank you, Harry, for letting me sit in on your programme during radio days. I'm fairly sure that after the football that Harry will be joining us tomorrow for day 3. And in the future, you can always join the live 555 Harry's discussion around the Autistic Radio.com Facebook page posts at 555 every Sunday. Every Sunday of 2005, we will be here having a discussion for you to listen to or for you to join in. Look at autisticradio.com to find us. Cheers, guys.